Well, Bev, it certainly appears to be the work of ISIS generally. It's reminiscent, of course, of the Bataclan theatre siege of November 2015. Four men with assault rifles throwing some grenades or other incendiary devices, acting with signs of military training, not panicking, not moving rapidly, calmly shooting people dead in cold blood. We've seen, of course, IsisK do similar things in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and also in Pakistan. Many of their attacks there involved suicide bombings in Hazara mosques. This is a little bit different, but there's every reason to believe the ISIS claim, and specifically, there's now reason to believe that this is IsisK, the Afghanistan affiliate.
Yeah. What would make IsisK target Russia?
Well, there's a long list, Bev, going back to the Russian occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s, more recently supporting Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Bashar al-Assad probably would have finished his regime were it not for the Russian Air Force coming in to rescue him. And of course, Assad was the main enemy of ISIS. Assad's regime killed more than ISIS, for what that's worth. So they're bitter rivals. So that puts Russia right at the top of the list. But also a history of awful bloodshed in the North Caucasus, in Chechnya in particular, against Muslim minorities. And then, of course, we've got many members of IsisK who are from Central Asia, and they remember Soviet abuses in those Soviet republics, and then ongoing support from Russia for a brutal crackdown. So lots of reasons to be angry with Russia.
Yeah. I understand that this group has been thwarted multiple times in Europe, and that, in fact, Putin was warned that an attack like this might be imminent. Had Russia become complacent about this possibility?
Yeah, not only complacent, it had become sort of arrogantly dismissive. So Putin had said a little over a week ago, America is trying to blackmail us. This is just an evil scheme to try and make Russia look weak. We're not buying it. Of course, it looks very different today. It wasn't just America. 5 European embassies also raised their concerns. And the Russian authorities themselves would have known that IsisK was planning. They stopped an IsisK attack on a synagogue, they said, just a couple of weeks ago. IsisK apparently in 2023 was behind 21 plots. Of course, it had a successful plot, an attack in Iran in January this year, massive suicide bombing on the 4th anniversary of the death of Qasem Soleimani. So there's plenty of reason to be afraid of this group, plenty of Central Asians living in Russia who are linked to it, and plenty of Russian nationals arrested in Europe on interrupted plots. So why was Russia not paying attention? Distracted by Ukraine, caught up in the drama of the fake election victory of Vladimir Putin in the Golden Palace of the Tsar. They were caught at a moment of weakness, and ISIS and IsisK in particular look for weakness. They're forensic. They take their opportunity when they find it. They generally fail, but when they succeed, it's awful.
Yeah, and as you say, just so soon after that sort of victory march of Putin, he has already tried to bring Ukraine into this narrative. This is highly unlikely, I would imagine, that Ukraine had anything to do with this.
Completely unlikely. I mean, Ukraine has launched attacks deep into Russia, even into Moscow, striking military targets, striking oil refineries, munition dumps, etc. They never use the methods of terrorism, striking innocent civilians. It would damage their reputation. It would completely counterproductive. So no reason to believe Ukraine. But of course, what was Putin's choice? Either he says the Americans were right, it was IsisK, or somebody else. Well, somebody else, particularly when he's got to deflect attention in Russia and direct anger and grief towards some external target. Talking about Ukraine just makes perfect sense from that point of view, even though it makes no sense in terms of analysis what actually happened.
Yeah. What is it going to mean for the war in Ukraine? Will Putin have to focus his resources elsewhere? Because I'd imagine that this could become a domestic issue for him, the security in Russian soil.
That's right. I mean, it would be rational to focus more efforts on looking at IsisK in Russia. He could launch a crackdown on Central Asian workers in Russia. There are literally millions of people from Central Asia, either documented or undocumented. But Vladimir Putin needs those people to work in his factories whilst Russian nationals are fighting in Ukraine or recovering from terrible injuries. So he can't afford a crackdown, and he can't afford to open up more fronts of conflict. The war in Ukraine has been awful for the people of Ukraine. But it's also been awful for Russia. They're not doing well. They haven't made any advances. They've gone through literally several 100,000 fighters in terms of deaths and serious injuries, and a lot of their hardware. So Putin is really in a spot. This is not the end of his regime, of course, but he needs to sort of desperately reinvent what's happening. So maybe a call up for general conscription, maybe some sort of doubling down on efforts, at least for a period of time, to look strong in Ukraine. If I was in Ukraine, I'd be very concerned about what he might be trying to do. But really, he doesn't have any good options.
Yeah. Greg, what does it tell you about, the broader shifts of these splinter groups, the alliances that are happening with terror cells, ISIS and others?
Well, Bev, for all of the complications in this sort of story, some things are pretty clear. We knew with the fall of Kabul, with the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, that this was a real frightening development, not just for the people of Afghanistan, but in terms of terrorist groups. Al-Qaeda has thrived under Taliban rule. Al-Qaeda is an affiliate, literally brothers, cousins of the Taliban rulers. Bitter rivals with IsisK. IsisK has come under a lot of attack from the Taliban, but it's grown stronger, more resilient. It's become an insurgency across almost the entirety of Afghanistan. And the fact that last year it tried 21 terror plots, up from 8 the previous year, shows a sharp escalation, both in its ambitions and its capacity for international attacks. So, we should be taking heed from this. We should be investing more in trying to improve the situation in Afghanistan for the people of Afghanistan, but also for the global community, because otherwise, give it another 5 years and things are going to get very much worse, it seems.
Yeah, it's a warning that should be heeded, but so many complications. So good to get your analysis. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Bev.